What is up, Formula One fans? It's James from the Formula One Bros, and we are back with another race review. This time coming at you after the Chinese Grand Prix. I watched it this morning. I did not stay up until 3 in the morning to watch it because, again, because of my day job, I don't like to watch the races in the middle of the night. So I watched it this morning, and I'm recording this afternoon. But what an eventful, packed weekend for the Chinese Grand Prix. Before we get into the Chinese Grand Prix, I'll cover some official news coming out from F1. I know I made a previous video that reports were coming out from the paddock and from the FIA that the April Middle East races were going to be canceled. And I said those are just reports. They haven't officially been announced by the FIA. Well, it was officially announced this morning that the races in the Middle East for April, Bahrain and Saudi Arabia, respectively, are going to officially be canceled. The reason they're being canceled is due to the ongoing conflict in the Middle East. It is uncertain as to whether or not we have two more. Well, before I get to that, we do have two more races later in the season in the Middle East, the Qatar, and then again in Abu Dhabi, which has been the season finale for quite some time. Those two races right now are still on the schedule. If the conflict is still ongoing, then it's most likely those races will be canceled as well. We don't yet know if those two races in particular, Qatar and Abu Dhabi, will get replaced with anything. It's not going to be the end of the world if we don't have, or if we only have 20 races in a Formula One season. Not too long ago, we only had, 16 to 18 races. I'm talking like the early 2000s. We only had like 16, then it was up to 18, and then 20, and then now 24 races in the season. So it's not going to be the end of the world if we don't have those four races. But it is pretty significant that those four races will be off the calendar this year, potentially with the later two being off the calendar, but definitely these first two races in the Middle East are canceled. I don't believe that they will be replaced with anything. I could potentially see the FIA trying to find a replacement for the latter two Middle East races in Qatar and Abu Dhabi. They still have quite some time. And there were rumors coming out that both Imola and Portimao were kind of on standby if need be. So it's uncertain about those, but these two races definitely canceled. That's the big news coming out of Formula One for this race weekend. So let's dive in talking everything about the Chinese Grand Prix race weekend. So I'm going to start off by talking about the sprint race first. I thought the sprint race was really great. It was really good racing. It was only 19 laps, so it was very quick. Lots of action throughout. The start, and we were treated to another really, really fantastic start. Both Mercedes and Ferrari battling up at the front. We got that in Australia, and now we got that with the sprint race. So another really, really great battle between between Lewis and George at the start, and then Charles Leclerc got in the mix, and there was a great battle between Charles and Lewis. Ended up with George winning the sprint race, and then the other two Ferraris were on the podium. It really was really, really great throughout. Towards the end, George Russell was kind of able to kind of sail off into the distance with that much quicker Mercedes, but we were treated to some really excellent driving between Charles and Lewis. So it was great racing up there. There's really great racing throughout the entire grid during the sprint race. So I thought it was really fun to watch. It was quick. It was really fun, action packed. I thought the sprint race was really great. And congrats to George for getting the W in the sprint race. And well done for Ferrari for getting a double podium. I know it's just a sprint race, but really, really great to see both Ferrari drivers up on the podium for that sprint race. All right, so let's get into the actual Chinese Grand Prix. Unlike the sprint race, I felt like the Chinese Formula One race wasn't the most boring race I'd ever seen, but it also wasn't the most exciting. We did have a safety car that was brought out by Lance Stroll parking his Aston Martin kind of off in a really odd spot in the track. Granted, he probably didn't have much of a choice. So he just pulled the car off, and they needed to get his car off the track. So that brought out the safety car. The safety car was in a interesting place in the race. There wasn't really a whole lot of strategy at play there, so it didn't really affect the grid all that much. We did see some drivers like Colapinto, one of the Haas and Alpine, kind of um, up at the front, and then very quickly the front drivers of George, Kimi, Charles, and Lewis, they quickly dispatched those drivers, and then they ended up having to pit anyway. So it really didn't affect much about that. I will say we were treated to very glorious double stacks from both Mercedes and Ferrari, and they executed them great. But again, nothing really changed about the pecking order with that. So the safety car normally when you get a safety car in a race weekend, it like changes up the strategy. It like throws a wrench in everyone's plan. But this one, not so much. Which is fine. That happens every so often. But we started off with a really, really strong start from Mercedes and Ferrari, especially Ferrari. Lewis Hamilton going up into the lead. Charles in third. Really, really great start. Ferrari has like been really, really solid on these race starts. I think Mercedes is still trying to figure out their deployment. And everything's, but Ferrari's been really great at these race starts. So they quickly went out to lead, and then as quickly as Ferrari got the lead, Mercedes took it right back with Kimi Antonelli going back up into the lead, and then George Russell quickly passing both Charles and Lewis. So it was a really, really great battle, but it was very clear early on in the race that it was definitely Mercedes that was going to control the race, and that they did. There wasn't really a whole lot Ferrari could do with that. And we can't talk about Mercedes controlling the race without mentioning Kimi Antonelli. Hats off, gets his first race win of his career at just 19 years old. He just finished high school. So what an incredible, incredible race for Kimi Antonelli. Finally gets his first win. There are a lot of emotions from him, from the team, and from other drivers at the end. I think everyone was very supportive of Kimi getting his first win. It was just overall really, really great. I'm a huge fan of Kimi Antonelli. I think he has a very, very bright future in the sport. I love his energy. I love his vibe. I love his charisma. He's really fast. He's a great driver. I think this is going to be just first of many, many race wins for Kimi Antonelli. So hats off to Kimi. Really, really excited about that. On the flip side, there were several drivers that didn't even get to start the race, mainly McLaren. Both McLaren drivers did not start the race due to reliability issues with their power unit. Gabriel Bortoleto did not start, along with Alex Albon. All four of those drivers didn't start the race, which is really unfortunate, and is really unfortunate for McLaren. That's going to be if they end up coming in, second or third in the championship, and it's really, really close, man, they're going to look back on this race weekend, back all the way back when it's, December. They're going to look all the way back on the Chinese race weekend, and they're going to be like, yep, that's what did it. So huge, huge disappointment from McLaren, and really just such a significant missed opportunity for McLaren at the Chinese Grand Prix. It was really heartbreaking for them. I felt really bad. It was just overall not a great situation. Like I'd mentioned before, there wasn't really a whole lot of action throughout the race. There were a couple squabbles, a couple bumps. Some drivers got bumped off the track. Isaac Hadjar spun in the first couple laps. I think it was actually the first lap. Isaac Hadjar spun, quickly got back on the track. There was a little bump. Esteban Ocon slid into Colapinto. Both spun and spun off the track in that turn two going into turn three area. Esteban Ocon, at first I was like, oh my gosh, Colapinto turned into him, as but then I saw the replay of it, and Esteban Ocon just lost control of the car and just slid into Colapinto. It was a really unfortunate racing event or race incident. I felt bad for Colapinto. I felt bad for Esteban. That situation kind of ruined both their races. So that was really unfortunate. But other than that, there really wasn't a whole lot of action um, throughout the race, and it was kind of boring. But that's okay. You get boring races every once in a while. Definitely not the most boring race I've ever seen, but it's no Germany 2019, that's for sure. But yeah, those are my first takes on the Chinese Grand Prix. Again, it wasn't crazy, action packed. It wasn't terribly boring, but yeah. So those are my initial thoughts on the Chinese Grand Prix. I will say though, with it being very unaction packed and not being very very interesting, Ferrari got an opportunity to not screw up the pit strategy. So I guess they're small mercies for Ferrari fans when it comes to strategy. The next thing I wanted to talk about is I made a lot of predictions. I posted like after the first shakedown, before even the first winter test. I did a prediction video of where I thought everyone would finish, where all the teams would finish. And I'm going to talk about kind of where we stand with that after the second Grand Prix race weekend of this season. So I made the prediction that Mercedes and Ferrari were going to be the top two, and so far they're the top two. Mercedes clear and away, far and away they're the fastest team right now. They're the team to beat. They're ahead in the championship. Their driver George Russell is leading the drivers' championship. So they're definitely strong in the lead. Obviously, they're the fastest car. They're the team to beat right now. Ferrari is in second. Um, I Ferrari is in second, and it seems like right now they don't have an answer to Mercedes. Personally, I think with how well that car has been developed over the off season, and all of the team members and everyone who are in charge of that had built a really good car. I think they have a really good understanding of this car, and they have a really good idea of what needs to be upgraded on the car. They already brought some chassis upgrades to China. They're bringing some more power unit upgrades to the next couple races. So I think we could really see Ferrari close the gap on Mercedes. Um, I really think we could see that. Have been so far very aggressive with their upgrades, and how fast and how many upgrades we're getting. And we're going to get a lot more from them in the coming weeks and months. So I think Ferrari could definitely close the gap. I still think it's 100% Mercedes title to win right now. They are still very much the best of the best of the field. I don't right now. I don't see them losing right now, unless I did say the Mercedes power unit in the winter test seemed to be not as reliable as the Ferrari power unit. So I could see if there's anything that's going to lose this championship for Mercedes, it could be reliability. Could be right now the Mercedes Works team. It looks to be incredibly fast, incredibly reliable. So we will see what will come of that. But right now, Mercedes and McLaren, or Mercedes and Ferrari, are definitely the top two. I accidentally slipped up and said McLaren. Let's talk about McLaren and Red Bull. I said with McLaren and Red Bull, with them in the prediction video, I said the difference that's going to be with them is one with McLaren. How will their reliability go? Like that's going to be what makes or breaks McLaren. And with Red Bull, how fast can that brand new Ford power unit be? And right now, it looks to be that's what's defining those two teams. Um, both, both McLaren drivers not being able to start this race is huge. It was huge that they weren't able to start this race, both for power unit reliability issues, not being able to start the race. So again, that's proving that my prediction was right. It's going to be the reliability, and of course, the other thing, McLaren and the Mercedes. The Mercedes customer teams like McLaren and Williams, they've received a much more stripped back version of the Mercedes engine. And so they're still trying to figure out the Mercedes engine, whereas the Mercedes Works team, they have it figured out. And theirs is a lot more beefed up. So I definitely think that this is going to be what defines McLaren this year is reliability to that Mercedes power unit. And right now with Red Bull, they just don't look as quick as McLaren and Ferrari and Mercedes. They don't look as quick. So I think right now, in terms of raw pace, I think Red Bull is the fourth best team right now. I can't remember off the top of my head where exactly all the teams shake out with the constructors' points and everything. But right now, I think Red Bull seems to be the fourth best team. Again, I think they're still working out kinks with that new the Ford power unit. And as well, it's a completely new concept of a car. You know, they're so used to the cars being designed a specific way because of Adrian Newey has been designed, and Adrian Newey is not designing, did not design this car. So it is kind of a new kind of concept, not just with the new regulations, but a new person has designed the car. So I'm sure it probably drives a lot differently than both Max and Isaac are used to with Red Bull. So I think there's going to be a lot to get used to. But I mentioned that those two things were going to be what defines McLaren and Red Bull, and so far those are what are currently defining McLaren and Red Bull. So I think McLaren and Red Bull are definitely third and fourth. Some other predictions that I had mentioned Aston Martin was going to finish up towards ninth out of 11. They are clearly last. Lance Stroll did not finish the race. I don't know I can't remember if Fernando Alonso finished the race or not. But at one point, Fernando Alonso, there's someone posted a clip on Twitter of Fernando Alonso during that long back straight. The vibration from the Honda power unit is so bad in that car that he had to take his hands off the steering wheel completely just because the vibration gotten so bad. Actually, I think he did end up retiring just because he couldn't physically hold the steering wheel anymore. It was so painful because the vibration was so bad in that car. So Aston Martin clearly is definitely the back marker right now. It's really not looking good. Supposedly their Honda's working on some pretty significant power unit upgrades, but we'll see what those upgrades can do. I also had mentioned that Audi was going to finish last, and they are doing way better than expected. I know Gabriel Bortoleto didn't start the race, but from Australia and then Hulkenberg performance, they are definitely doing a lot better than expected. And their Australian Grand Prix race was fantastic. They had a great start to the season, so they're definitely doing a lot better than expected. Alpine is also doing better than expected, which is really great. And I thought Cadillac was going to do better than what they're doing. I did predict Cadillac to finish near the back just because they're a brand new team. And right now they are definitely showing all of the things that is to be expected from a brand new team. Bits and pieces of the car kind of falling apart. They're slow, reliability issues. Guys, this is normal. If you were really hyped up about Cadillac joining the grid and they're going to do so well, all this stuff, and you're disappointed, this sport is very difficult for new teams. I mean, look back at Haas joining the grid in 2016. That was not a good season for Haas. Look back 2010. We got three brand new teams that joined the grid. HRT joined the grid. Lotus joined the grid. And Virgin joined the grid. All three of those teams were the last three teams to finish in the Constructors' Championship. And within a couple years, all of those teams were no longer in Formula One. So I'm not saying that will happen to Cadillac. I'm not saying in 3 years Cadillac's going to be gone. Because again, Cadillac is owned by GM. GM is the biggest car manufacturer on the planet. They're going to be fine. This is normal for a brand new team to join the grid. All of the things that we are seeing, the growing pains that we are seeing from Cadillac, it's normal. If you're coming into this season super hype on Cadillac and are disappointed right now, it's okay. It's okay. It is normal. It's going to be a work in progress. I think they can make significant strides throughout this season, but this season is going to be a huge learning curve for that team. It is a brand new team. So it's going to be a huge learning curve for them this first season. And the first couple seasons may be a little bit rough for the team, but that's okay. I'm not worried about Cadillac. I really, everything that they're experiencing right now is totally expected. Again, it's from a new team. So nothing really to worry about there. So those are some of the big predictions that I had made about this season so far. And some of them I was way off. Some of them I've hit the nail on the head. But yeah, that's where we stand so far after the Chinese Grand Prix. So there's one last thing that I wanted to mention on this podcast before we wrap up for this week. I posted a TikTok about this, and this is purely just my personal opinions. Okay, we're going into just my personal opinions on where we stand, and I want to talk about after we've seen 2 Grand Prix now with these new regulations. We've heard a lot from the drivers, but I just wanted to give my perspective as a Formula One fan, but not only just a Formula One fan, someone who's been watching this sport since Schumacher was racing in Ferrari. I looking back on some of my memories of watching Formula One races as a kid, I remember watching the 2006 San Marino Grand Prix, the battle between Schumacher and Fernando Alonso at Renault. I remember watching that battle live on air. Of looking ahead, I remember watching Sebastian Vettel and the Du bist Weltmeister. I remember watching that live. I cried because my driver, Sebastian Vettel, won his first world title. I remember watching the historic 2013 season where Sebastian won 9 races in a row, and and I look back on some of those memories. And as a Formula One fan who's been a fan of the sport by pretty much my entire life, I want to give my perspective on these new regulations. I posted a TikTok about it, but I wanted to talk about it here on the podcast for this week. The goal of these regulations was to make the racing better. From that perspective, nailed it. Nailed it. I mean, I mentioned last week that we went from 2025 Australian Grand Prix where we had 45 overtakes to this year we had 120 overtakes. Chinese Grand Prix, there were a lot of overtakes, especially the battle at the beginning. We saw, Mercedes and Ferrari trading places very often. We saw a lot of different overtakes, a lot of great battles. So in that perspective, these new regulations have achieved their goal. But my personal opinion on it is I think it is a little bit too manufactured. And what I mean by that, the overtakes are coming because drivers are relying so heavily either on deployment of the battery or recharging of the battery. So we're seeing these awesome overtakes, but it's almost kind of like a yo-yo effect. One driver passes because they're able to deploy the battery while the other one is harvesting. And then the next lap, that driver passes it back because the driver that's in front is now harvesting and they're able to deploy. So it's less, they've taken the raw skill, the raw talent, what makes this sport magical from a motorsport fan. It takes that kind of magic of motorsport out of the cockpit and relies on just the battery deployment. So again, purely from an entertainment perspective, goal achieved. We got overtakes. But where the FIA has gone wrong is it's too manufactured. The overtakes are manufactured. They're not happening because the drivers are using every ounce of that car, every ounce of their talent to pass another driver. It's just kind of saturated. And as a true motorsport, as a motorsport, I wouldn't say true motorsport fan because I don't want to discredit all the other, Formula One fans who are only Formula One fans and not really fans of any other motorsport, or newer Formula One fans. I don't want to discredit any of those fans. But as a motorsport fan who grew up on Formula One, on NASCAR, on endurance racing, WEC and IMSA, it's kind of taken the magic out of it a little bit. And it looks cool for TV ratings, but I don't know. It's just, it doesn't feel the same. And a lot of drivers have mentioned that, and that's kind of been the theme of what drivers are talking about. It's it's battery management. It's not racing. Max Verstappen has said it's like Formula E on steroids, and even Formula E drivers have called out at Formula One and the FIA for being like, yeah, these regulations are not good for Formula One. And I happen to agree with him, and I'm going to give a comparison. I think what Formula One is doing is eerily similar to what happened in NASCAR, starting in the late 2000s, early 2010s. So not only did I grow up as a Formula One fan, I also grew up as a huge NASCAR fan. From America or from the South, NASCAR was huge. It was inbred into or ingrained into the culture of the Southern United States, NASCAR. 2006, 2007. I would say 2007. That was the peak of NASCAR's popularity. And it was so popular. I remember the 2007 Daytona 500. There was a photo finish between Mark Martin and Kevin Harvick at the Daytona 500. That was front page headlines on every single newspaper and magazine the next day. Everyone was talking about it. Kevin Harvick was invited on Good Morning America, on talk shows, and all this stuff. NASCAR was so popular and so ingrained into pop culture here in America in 2007. That was, I think, some of it was in part to the greatest Pixar movie ever made, Cars, coming out in 2006. But NASCAR was peak popularity. Iconic Gen 4 cars. That era of NASCAR, those cars, the Gen 4 cars, the best era of that sport. The paint schemes, which here in America with NASCAR, we call them paint schemes. We don't call them liveries. We call them paint schemes. Iconic paint schemes. Think of Jeff Gordon's DuPont car, or Jimmy Johnson Lowe's, or Kyle Busch's car with the Tony the Tiger on it, and Matt Kenseth's DeWalt Power Tools car. Dale Earnhardt Jr.'s Budweiser car. Just think all those iconic, liveries or paint schemes. And then after 2007, NASCAR started to make changes to kind of increase the viewership. They introduced the Car of Tomorrow, which was generally hated by all the NASCAR drivers. A couple years later, they introduced the NASCAR, the playoffs, the race to the championship, the playoffs, and that all of that was put in place for NASCAR to chase the fans, to chase viewers, to chase TV ratings, all to try and make the TV ratings go up. And I fear, and honestly, as a NASCAR fan, that made me stop watching NASCAR. I stopped watching NASCAR for a long time. And just recently, I'm really starting to get back into watching NASCAR. And now NASCAR, they've gotten rid of the playoffs. They brought back the chase. And the other thing they introduced is stage racing. Stage racing is dumb for NASCAR. It doesn't make any sense. I think that's going to be the next thing that goes, is the stage racing. But NASCAR is starting to listen to the fans and starting to revert back to the way the sport was. They're starting to revert the sport back to what it was when NASCAR was at its peak popularity. And I fear that Formula One is falling down the same rabbit hole that NASCAR fell down to in the late 2000s, early 2010s, trying to chase TV ratings, trying to chase viewers, which is why they're introducing all these new regulations to try and make the passing better, the racing better, all the sprint races that they're doing, which sprint races are fine, but they feel kind of gimmicky. They don't really, it's just another opportunity for drivers to, you know, either ruin it, it creates greater risk for the teams. The drivers have the chance of, you know completely binning the cars, and then they're out for the rest of the race weekend. Like, I don't think it's fine. The sprint races are fine, but Formula One is starting to do that, where they're trying to implement these things to try and chase viewers, and what they're doing is alienating the fans of the sport who have been fans for a long time, like myself. I feel like I'm kind of being left behind as a fan. And I know I'm not the only one that feels like that. Um, and not to discredit all of the newer fans of Formula One. I love and appreciate all the new fans of Formula One, because this sport is beautiful. This is a beautiful sport. This sport was my childhood, and everything, and I want people to be fans of the sport. But it's I think they're going about this the wrong way, and they're kind of alienating a portion of their fan base, to try and chase TV ratings. Um, because again, the overtakes, there are a lot of them, but they're manufactured, and the drivers are more just managing battery rather than just all out racing. And another thing, I this weekend I saw a lot of clips pop up on TikTok and on Twitter of like like qualifying pole laps from like 2007, the 2017 to 2021 era, before we got all these new regulations and everything. And those pole laps are mind-boggling, how fast those cars are, and it is pure raw talent from the drivers. They're extracting everything they have out of those cars. Like, I watched Charles Leclerc's 2019 pole lap from Singapore. I watched Lewis Hamilton's 2018 pole lap from Singapore. Um, I watched a bunch of clips of Sebastian Vettel's pole laps from when he was at Red Bull. I saw all those clips pop up on my feed, and it's just mind boggling. After watching the regulations for the past couple years, it's mind boggling how fast those cars are. And then watching qualifying and pole laps from the past two Grand Prix, it's just not the same. And so, so I just like word vomited a lot of my personal feelings on these regulations. So I'll do a little recap on my thoughts. So here's the TLDR. They wanted to go after, creating better racing, and purely from an entertainment standpoint, they've done that. But they've taken a lot what made this sport magic out of the equation. That's just my personal opinion. They've taken a lot of what makes this sport so magical out of it. It seems like they've taken a portion of the driver's talent away and just left it up to whether or not your battery's charged. And again, that's not what this sport's about, in my personal opinion. I would love to hear what you all think about these regulations in the comments. I'd love to hear your take. I'd love to hear your thoughts and opinions about it. Keep it respectful, because I did post that video and some people were saying that I'm an idiot and I don't know what I'm talking about, when I have been a fan of this sport since like the early 2000s. Like 2002, I remember watching my first Formula One race. And so I have an idea of the sport and everything. But I'd love to hear what you guys think about this. I know some people love them, some people hate them. Right now I'm a hater. I think they can improve. I think they're going to be adjustments that are going to be made. I think there are going to be some things that the FIA will change. But the fact that a lot of fans are disliking them, and most of the drivers universally hate them, I think something will change. It's just this iteration right now. It's just not very. Um, it's interesting to say the least. So again, beauty is in the eyes of the beholder. So I think if you like them, great. Let me know. But if you also feel the same way about it, let me know down in the comments what you think. But that is all I have for you for this Chinese Grand Prix race weekend. As always, let us know down in the comments what you think, what you thought about the race, what you think about the podcast. Hit us up on TikTok. Make sure you give us a follow and everything. Make sure you subscribe, like, comment, share, all that good stuff. And we'll see you after the next race.